So you told yourself, I want to start reading in 2026, but what do I even read? What do I even find? What genre do I start with? And in those genres, do I start with the basics? Do I go all the way heavy metal to the pedal? I got you covered because today I have one book from each genre that is perfect if you're just starting out on your reading journey this year. If you don't know me, I'm Grace. I make book videos, lifestyle content, occasionally with a Starbucks in my hand. But today is not about the makeup or the look or the fashion. Today, it's all about what books you're going to get for 2026 because it's only like halfway through January. Plenty of time. But today we are going to be going through one book from each genre or subgenre to get you started on your reading journey this year. Because in 2026, a lot of people made New Year's resolutions. I saw a ton of people making videos about how they want to start reading more and what books do they read, and how a lot of people, when they get acquainted with one genre, they recommend the most complex books from that genre, and it's not very beginner friendly. And I'm not one to gatekeep reading. I don't think there's any shame if you're just starting out, whether you read 4 books a year or 137 books a year, whichever one is fine. We have romance, we have poetry, we have classic books, we have fantasy, YA fantasy. So let's start out with your average romance. You want something for the romance genre that will keep your attention, keep you engaged, but also introduce you to some tropes. Maybe you find out what you like and what you don't like, because not everyone likes the same thing when it comes to romance. I tend to like childhood friends to lovers trope, but a lot of people really love enemies to lovers, which I love too, but I like more of a balance. And my recommendation for the beginner romance reader is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This one just got adapted into a Netflix movie, which I have not yet seen, but I'm thinking it's going to be really good. I've seen a lot of reviews of it that are really good. But this one is about Poppy and Alex, and she's a wild child and he wears khakis, which tells you everything you need to know about their relationship. And every summer they go on a road trip or vacation and they bond and they fall in love. And it takes you back through the summers about how they met in college and how their relationship blossoms and also their fights and struggles. Additionally, it has a lot of important settings, such as Palm Springs. There's a very funny scene involving the air conditioner that I just really love. One, we have some children's slash YA fantasy, because fantasy, there's a big spectrum. So you have high fantasy, you have more romantasy, then you have light fantasy, then you have fantasy realism. So I just decided to start with the basics because it can be really confusing. And I'm someone who used to think if I don't understand it, then I'm stupid. And that's actually not the case. Usually it's just because people overcomplicate things and it doesn't make sense to you. So I'm here to undercomplicate things. Howl's Moving Castle. If you're familiar with Studio Ghibli, or Ghibli Studio, whichever one it is a massively popular animation company, and they make very cozy films based off of children's books, but it's really for everybody. And Howl's Moving Castle is one of the most popular of them. It's about a girl who gets transformed into an old woman. She has to go live with this really, really obnoxious diva villain, and they fall in love. But that's not even towards like the end of the book. So most of it is about their journey to try to fix the house, the flying house that they live in, basically, because it's Howl's Moving Castle, because the castle moves, and it is just amazing. I read this in one night, I think. That's how good it was, is I just stayed up and read the whole thing. Great because it doesn't have a ton of world building. So you focus mostly on the characters, which is really good if you're just starting out with fantasy. That way you don't overwhelm yourself. If you're into poetry, we have Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. Kaur. I don't know how her name is pronounced, but it is a poetry book that is very accessible. So when I was putting together my little stack of books and what I wanted to recommend to y'all today, one of the things that I looked at on my poetry shelf was like, okay, we have some Robert Frost, we have some Emily Dickinson, we have some William Shakespeare sonnets, but those aren't really accessible. A lot of those seem kind of like the scary poets. where it's like, ugh, they use the word betwixt. That scares me. And I completely understand. The only reason that I read those is because, in case you don't know me, I had a lot of free time on my hands as a kid. So one thing that I would do is read books that were way too advanced for my age. So I basically spoke with the verbiage of an 1800s grandpa. I think she went viral on Instagram for her poems and then started putting out poetry collections. Started it when I got it, but I'm in college, so finishing books is a luxury that sometimes I can't afford. But if you're starting out on poetry, Rupi Kaur is the way to go. Classic history. So a lot of history books you think 8th grade class when that stupid jock would flirt with you and made you want to crawl in a hole and die. But now we're adults, so it's a little bit better than that. Or you're a teenager, whichever. But this one is Dear America, The Diary of Piper Davis. And the Dear America books technically are children's books, but a lot of the main characters are teenagers or young adults. So it really transfers across the reading age. But this is in World War II, and she goes to live in an incarceration camp because her father is a pastor. And it is a diary. So you're reading her entries as time passes chronologically. And she has a little romance, she makes friends. But one of the important things is that it covers the war and life inside an incarceration camp, concentration camp. This book differs from a lot of regular history books because a lot of history books focus on the event, right, and how it affects the characters. This book focuses on the character and how she interprets the event. So it makes it more engaging, more gripping. I remember crying when I read this book. I've loved it since about 8th grade onwards. I actually just finished. It is James by Percival Everett. I just finished this like a couple days ago, and I'm now starting on the Mortal Instruments book 2 because I'm reading that series right now. My YA fantasy binge. But James by Percival Everett. It won numerous awards, including the National Book Award winner and the New York Times Book Review 10 Best Books of 2024 award. And I found this, everyone was recommending it online, and I saw that it was a take on Huckleberry Finn, where it takes the slave from the story Jim and it gives him his own backstory, and it delves into the life that he had, which, obviously the author has his, interpretation of that's what the book's about. The character Jim was very much stereotyped and he didn't have much of a personality. They were operating off of what people thought was appropriate for that time, which is very much not appropriate. But James, the book, we follow his story as he is trying to escape and also free his family. And he gets involved in a singing troupe, and there's a lot of comedy too, which, it discusses really heavy themes. So you might not think of it as approaching comedy, but this book has some really funny parts to it that I was like laughing audibly, which is not common for me. Usually, even if it's a comedy book, I'm not laughing out loud because I read in public. If you are new to like the classic genre, I like this one because it feels more modern, but it's a continuation. So it's a little bit bridging the gap. Jane in Love by Rachel Givney. This book is about Jane Austen time traveling to when her book was adapted into a movie. And it is so cool. She basically falls in love with the lead actress's brother, but obviously she doesn't know how the modern world works. So she has to relearn that or learn it for the first time since she's time traveling. And she discovers that this witch sent her, forward in time to when her movie is adapted. And eventually she has to decide whether to go back in time to write or stay in the present and follow her heart. Because, the longer that she stays here, her books start to disappear because she hadn't written them when she time traveled. And it talks a lot about also aging and the Hollywood beauty standard and how women are seen to have sort of an expiration date of when they're seen as desirable, because that's what the lead actress struggles with right now in the movie. And honestly, I could see it as a movie playing out as I read it. I read the whole thing in one sitting or two sittings. It was amazing. It felt like one of those books that like just quiets your brain so you can really absorb it. And it felt like I was drinking some kind of tropical drink on an island and I was on a beach towel and some kids were playing with a beach ball over there, and then there's like a girl with her friends over there having fun, and there's like birds trying to steal people's sandwiches. It's YA fantasy. I picked a classic because, as you know, we have to start with the classics. So I picked Maze Runner because I was thinking Six of Crows, but Six of Crows has a lot of world building. It's kind of a dense book, so you have to be like a fantasy fan to get into that. I had a rough road because I didn't start out on the easy stuff. I jumped straight to Six of Crows, and it was a rough journey there. We got there, but it took a while. It took me like a month to read that book. So I would recommend starting out with something a little bit easier to grasp, such as Maze Runner by James Dashner. You might have seen the movie with Dylan O'Brien. It was 2010's Dylan O'Brien, and you know, the best thing to watch on TV is 2010's Dylan O'Brien. This mythical, futuristic dystopian world where the government, wicked, not at all involving Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, I promise, but they are sending kids into a maze to experiment on them because there is a brain virus going around, and these kids are the first generation that's immune. So the government and this like health research organization is trying to figure out how to experiment on the kids to extract a cure, which is unethical because they're essentially tormenting the kids. But there's a book series. So the Maze Trials is the first one, and then you go on as they try to combat the government, as a group of teenagers always does in these books. So normally YA fantasy is from the perspective of a girl, and I like this because it's from the perspective of a guy, so it's a little bit different. When starting out with the Maze Runner, it is a multiple book series. I believe there's 5 in total, and there's only 3 movies, which confused me, but it wraps up the series quite nicely, so I would recommend watching the movies alongside books. Because one thing that I was doing when I started out reading different genres was I was watching the movies as a companion to the books to help me understand the plot and the characters, and it combined the reading with like the audio and the visual, and it had all the components so I could focus better. Especially when it comes to like tougher works like Charles Dickens and Jane Austen, you want to watch the adaptation to help you grasp the storyline, to help you get the main concept so you can focus on what you're reading. Then it wouldn't be a book recommendation if I'm not including nonfiction, because that's also a big genre. And if you're into reading nonfiction and educational books, which I definitely had a phase of that, then one of the most valuable ones is the memoir genre. And my favorite one of this genre that I would recommend to anyone who wants to have a good representation of what you can find in this genre is Paris, the memoir. Paris Hilton's memoir about her time as a teenager and young adult in the early 2000s, how she became basically the first influencer because she was paid to wear outfits and attend parties and influence people. The first really paid influencer. And her lifestyle, how she met her husband, her journey with motherhood, her diagnosis with ADHD. She was sent to a detention center by her parents, technically a reformment camp, but it was much more like a prison. And she talks about how she tried to escape multiple times. And you would not think that a woman who grew up, from a very privileged background would have such a layered and traumatizing story. And she very much does. And I was absolutely hooked from page 1. I read this 2 or 3 years ago, and I have not forgotten it since. And there are specific passages that I still remember. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you for coming back to the bookshelf to get your starter pack book recommendations. And that was every genre and every subgenre that I could feasibly think of that I had something really brilliant to recommend you from. And now you can get started adding those to your Goodreads, your TBR, your Notion page, your reading journal, whatever you use. And if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe and follow me on the social medias, the interwebs, so you can be involved in picking ideas for videos and content and recommendations, because that's where I get all my inspiration from, is you guys on Instagram. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. And no matter what you're reading, I hope it is a great book, and I hope you have a great day. Bye!